How do you fight something that adapts faster than you can understand it? That was the question haunting the Hart family the first night they moved into the old brick house on Union Avenue in Atchison, Kansas. At first, it was subtle, almost dismissible. A chair slightly out of place, a door closed that they were certain they had left open. Every sound, every shadow seemed to echo with intention. The house had a reputation, though they only learned of it later. A child named Sallie had died there decades ago, and rumors whispered that her spirit never left. But to the Harts, it began simply as an uneasy feeling, a whisper of doubt. They tried desperately to rationalize. Children's imaginations are wild, they told themselves. Houses make noises. The wind gets in through cracks. Reasonable explanations were their first defense, their shield against fear. And yet, that shield would fail. The first signs were almost playful, almost innocent. Toys moved while the children were in another room. A rocking chair creaked in the empty living room, and the soft sound of footsteps echoed through hallways that should have been silent. The parents attributed it to the child's imagination or their own exhaustion from the move. The family journaled each occurrence, a mental log of things that didn't make sense but could be explained. They clung to the notion that everything was psychological, the product of stress, fatigue, or coincidence. But the house seemed to push back against their logic, testing the limits of their skepticism, challenging them to see what was truly there. At night, the house changed. Shadows didn't fall where they should. The familiar layout seemed distorted. The children reported a girl standing in the corners of rooms, watching, smiling. At first, their parents chalked it up to dreams or imagination. But then, one morning, they found the kitchen chairs overturned, the breakfast table in disarray, and small scratches on the wall where none should have been. No one had been near the area. It was the first moment the rational explanations faltered. They tried to laugh it off, joking among themselves to calm their nerves. Yet every sound, every unexplained movement, tightened a knot of dread in their stomachs, an instinctive recognition that something was not only present, but aware. As days passed, the incidents escalated. Objects moved in impossible ways, and shadows seemed to linger long after the light source had changed. The children spoke of Sallie directly, describing her with details no one had told them, speaking to her as if she were a playmate. But the way she interacted with them was unsettling, almost deliberate. A ball would roll toward her direction, a door would slam, or a toy would fly across the room. And when the parents confronted the children, their words were calm, matter-of-fact, and chillingly precise. "She doesn't like it when you lie," the daughter said one evening, her small voice carrying an authority that belonged to no child. Rationality felt fragile here, bending under the pressure of impossible events. The house had a rhythm, a consciousness that adapted, learning how the family thought, what they would dismiss, and what would truly terrify them. The family attempted to document the experiences. They set cameras, audio recorders, even called in friends and neighbors. Each new piece of technology brought new evidence, but also new contradictions. Shadows appeared on tape in places no one could be. Sounds recorded that defied explanation. And yet, some devices captured nothing, as if the house chose what to reveal. Even the skeptics were unsettled, unsure whether it was a cruel trick, mass hysteria, or something else entirely. The house did not merely haunt, it manipulated perception, feeding paranoia like a careful predator, striking just at the edge of reason. Every attempt to prove logic failed to satisfy. Every attempt to confront fear only led to more questions, more dread. The psychological toll was immense. The parents began to doubt themselves, arguing over what was real and what was imagined. Sleep became erratic, punctuated by sudden noises, fleeting touches, and the sensation of being watched. The children, once energetic and playful, withdrew, speaking less to their parents and more to the unseen presence they insisted was real. And still, the incidents continued with an eerie consistency, as if the house studied their reactions, learning what would frighten them, what would break their rational defenses. Hallways that should have felt familiar felt alien. The air itself seemed charged with intention. It was subtle at first, then relentless, the psychological pressure building incrementally until reason itself felt like a fragile veneer over chaos. Then came the moments that could no longer be explained. Objects flew across rooms without visible force. Doors slammed with such intensity that frames shook, and footsteps ascended staircases where no one was. The children spoke with voices that were not theirs, often quoting things the family did not say, repeating phrases in tones and inflections they could not have known. One evening, the father awoke to a child's laughter, only to find his daughter asleep in her bed, her eyes wide open in unseeing fear. His wife witnessed furniture levitate for a brief moment before crashing back to the ground. Rational explanations evaporated. There was nothing left to attribute these events to except something intelligent, something alive within the walls themselves. The Hart family sought guidance from both religious and secular authorities. Paranormal investigators came, skeptics arrived, and yet each visitor left with a mix of intrigue and unease. Some captured fleeting glimpses of figures on cameras. Others reported sensations of being touched or watched. Attempts to communicate with a presence brought mixed results. Sometimes the house responded with violent interruptions. Objects hurled, or sudden, cold drafts. Other times, the interaction was subtle, a quiet acknowledgement in a creaking floorboard or whisper of air. Every interaction reinforced the reality that the family was not in control, and that whatever was here understood them, their routines, their psychology, and their fear. Sleep deprivation, anxiety, and confusion became daily companions. Every corner of the house seemed alive, every room a potential threat. Family members began to question their sanity, doubting their own perceptions, their memories. A sense of hyper-awareness developed. Even when awake, they felt monitored. One evening, while reviewing a recording, they saw the unmistakable outline of a small girl moving against the logic of the room, her head turning toward the camera as though acknowledging it directly. The image lingered, and they felt something inescapable, a force not bound by time, perception, or reason. Rational thought collided violently with an undeniable presence, and the house revealed itself fully, if only briefly, to the family's horror. Over time, the incidents became more specific, more targeted. It was as if Sallie, or whatever occupied her memory, could sense the family's strategies, their attempts to normalize or dismiss the events. Objects were thrown, not randomly, but with precision. Doors slammed when least expected, and whispered phrases seemed to taunt them in the dark. Every attempt at logical analysis failed. Even physical interactions occurred. Scratches, bruises, and cold touches that left a tangible residue of the impossible. What had begun as subtle psychological manipulation escalated into a confrontation with something undeniably real, adaptive, and malevolent. The existential weight of living under constant observation warped the family's sense of self and reality. Doubt became constant. Was this a haunting? Or was it something beyond human comprehension? Something that existed where psychology and reality intersected and could bend them both? Sleep was scarce. The children's nightmares seeped into their waking hours. Even laughter felt suspect, as though joy itself was a violation in the presence of a being that demanded attention, recognition, and fear. Every hallway, every corner, every creak of floorboards was a reminder they were not alone. And whatever was here had learned to anticipate, adapt, and manipulate them with precision. It was during a late-night incident, unprovoked and sudden, that the final, undeniable proof arrived. Objects flew across rooms with no human intervention. Lights flickered in impossible patterns, and the children spoke in voices not their own, commanding attention with a certainty that made the parents freeze in terror. The air thickened, the temperature dropped. The mother, frozen in place, felt a force brush against her shoulder. The father watched in disbelief as a chair lifted several inches off the ground before slamming back with terrifying force. At that moment, there was no doubt. The house had agency, intelligence, and intent. It was no longer a matter of imagination or coincidence. Something alive, conscious, and adaptive was present, and it had revealed itself fully. Even after leaving the house, the psychological impact lingered. Sleep patterns were disrupted, paranoia persisted, and the boundary between rational thought and fear remained fragile. The family often questioned whether their experiences had changed them permanently, altered the way they perceived reality, or revealed truths about human perception and vulnerability. For them, the story of Sallie House became not just a tale of haunting, but a meditation on the limits of reason, the fragility of perception, and the terrifying possibility that some presences cannot be rationalized, controlled, or escaped. So, what was it? Was it truly demonic, the restless spirit of a child trapped by death and memory? Or was it a psychological phenomenon, magnified by suggestion, fear, and the architecture of the mind? The Hart family's experiences suggest that for a brief, intense period, everything they knew about reality was suspended, replaced by a consciousness that adapted faster than they could understand it, a presence that manipulated, observed, and dictated terms they could not contest. For the outside world, the house may appear empty, but for those who lived there, every corner, every shadow, and every whisper held proof that some things are not meant to be understood. Some things are meant only to be survived. If you think you could face the unknown, remember the Hart story. Remember that reality is fragile, that perception is a gift easily twisted, and that sometimes the dead or whatever lingers smarter than you are. Keep your lights on, your senses alert, and know that the world may contain corners where rationality cannot follow. For those who dare to explore, Sallie House remains a warning. Some presences do not play fair. They adapt, they watch, and they wait. And when they act, there is no ignoring it.